So Bloober Team has finally released the long-anticipated remake of Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill 2 is one of those horror games that you might have not played, but you definitely have heard of for sure. I mean, it has one of the most iconic OSTs of all time, one of the most memorable atmospheres in a horror game, and really just such an iconic look to it. The camera angles, everything applied to that game is very unique. I actually got around to playing the game earlier sometime in January of this year, and it was one of the most memorable experiences I've ever had with a video game. Sure, the combat of the game was very janky, it's very outdated for sure. Visually speaking, it's also kind of outdated. It was sort of an early PS2 game, but I gotta say, there was just so many quirks and personality traits within the story and within the identity of the game itself that it makes sense as to why it sticks out in a sea of other horror games. I think the most unfortunate thing to happen from the entire Silent Hill thing is the disbandment of Team Silent when Konami disbanded Team Silent after releasing Silent Hill 3, and they decided to hire a Western studio to make more Western-based games, as apparently most of their demographic came from the West, and we know how that went. The titles made in the Western studios were one of the most criticized Silent Hill games ever, and a lot of people are still disappointed till this day that they disbanded Team Silent. However, with that being said, Bloober Team decided to take the risk and challenge to remake the beloved classic Silent Hill 2. Now, when they released the trailer for this, like the teaser trailer for Silent Hill 2, it was one of the most criticized trailers on the site, really. A lot of people did not like it. A lot of people called it a Resident Evil clone. And looking back at it, I really see it. I was also one of the people who were a bit skeptical. I didn't completely hate it or anything like that, but it was definitely one of those like the look that it gave me, the feeling that it gave me was like they're definitely basing this off from the Capcom remakes, and I have a feeling that it might lose the identity and credibility that the game had. With this overbearing amount of criticism, it seemed that Bloober Team really heard their complaints as they decided to showcase, I think it was a 15 or 20 minute gameplay trailer on the Sony State of Play this summer, and it really won back the entire crowd. They really took notes in the atmosphere. They had a very good balance between cinematic, realistic graphics and also the horror, spooky-esque elements and atmosphere that the original game had. Yes, it's over the head and it does abandon the old camera angles that were in the original game, but it still stick truthful and faithful to what the game was all about. In addition to this, Bloober Team would partner up with Akira Yamaoka, the original composer for the Silent Hill 2 game, which showcased how Bloober Team was really putting in the effort to recreate the scenario, the atmosphere, everything that makes Silent Hill 2 so damn unique. So fast forward to now to the release of Silent Hill 2 Remake, and I gotta say, they really killed it with this remake. So the obvious thing that you can spot in the gameplay is that, wow, and now it's over the head, as I said it recently, kind of borrowing that, I guess, those elements that you see from the modern day horror remakes, Resident Evil being the obviously the biggest example of it, but it isn't a complete copycat of Resident Evil. If anything, it's really its own style. The combat is very different. Obviously in the original, the combat was very sticky, it felt like very robotic. Obviously to mimic just how James was very inexperienced in the game and he was like a normal civilian and blah blah blah, but still, in this game, there's so much dynamic put into it. You can dodge the attacks, the enemies can really hit back with different move sets. Sometimes it's very unpredictable, and it'll really have you on the edge of your seat when it comes to trying to calculate the moves. The gunplay in this game is very sharp and aggressive. If you're playing this game with a PlayStation 5 controller, everything just feels so like interactive. Like just switching from a handgun to a hunting rifle to a shotgun to any other weapon, you feel the balance, you feel the weight of holding the weapon and shooting it. And whatever you run out of ammo, that feeling of fear and dread when you had to like run away, you're just solely reliant on your own like just mentality of just dodging and just trying to at least land some hits in. Because there are some enemies in here that, bro, if you just go full on melee, you're cooked. You're really cooked. And I really love that Bloober Team in this remake really upped the difficulty of some enemies. There were a lot of enemies in the original Silent Hill that weren't that much of a threat, but man, they really made all the enemies here a threat. And as you progress in the game, things just get harder and harder and harder. And you can't really become this cocky guy that you once were playing the original game. I really enjoyed how these enemies have varying hitboxes, as you can shoot some enemies in the knees and the legs and it'll take a couple more bullets than others, and when you stun them you can kind of appreciate that time to just hit them with a steel pipe or the bat or whatever melee weapon you are using. I also really enjoy that you can't just find ammo everywhere. It's not like in Resident Evil. I'm sorry for using Resident Evil as an example constantly, but I guess the first thing that I think of. With Resident Evil, at least like in Resident Evil 4, it's obviously a bit more action based. But there's like a lot of ammo everywhere in that game. I didn't feel necessarily like threatened by many of the enemies, even playing that game in hardcore. However, in this game, even on normal, a lot of the ammo is scarce. You really gotta use it wisely, especially your health potions, your syringes, anything that you can use for health. Everything feels very limited, and you have to be very calculated in terms of how you use the material. Of course, Silent Hill 2 falls under survival horror branch, but in this game, in this version, it really does feel like a survival horror game. Like, it's very true to its own nature. I'm probably not the only one when I say that in the original Silent Hill 2, the puzzles were beyond cryptic at times, and I really had to use a guide. I'm not afraid of saying it, but I definitely had to use a guide sometimes because I would just never figure it out. Same thing with Silent Hill 3 when I played that game. It was like, these are very hard puzzles, and anybody got time for that. Nobody has time to just do the cryptic puzzles all by yourself. Maybe if you love puzzles, go ahead, but for me, I'm not that much of a big puzzle guy. But anyway, with this game, what I really enjoy is that not all the puzzles are cryptic. They are very solvable even without a guide. I'm not gonna lie, I think one of the first two puzzles of the game had me slightly looking for a guide or for clues, because I was kind of relying on James kind of like just doing the circles and stuff like that and just pointing you where to go. But my dumbass forgot to read some notes and some obvious indicators, so that might be me. But I think especially for unexperienced players or who are trying to get a grasp of how Silent Hill works, or Silent Hill 2 works in general, they might be a bit lost in its beginning, but as they go on, they will really kind of get the hang of it, because that's really how it felt when I played the game. I was a bit interested in how they would incorporate the puzzles. Would it be as cryptic or beyond cryptic as the original, or would it be a bit more cutting slack and just giving you a bit more obvious clues? I would say that it's a bit more of a balance, if anything. Like, there are some areas where it feels a bit cryptic, but when you kind of like just give a few more minutes for it to kick in and really analyze the details and notes, you kind of already got the answers. It's a bit obvious at some points. There were some puzzles that I thought it was like, well, this is pretty obvious. I don't know why they kind of formed it as a puzzle. And there were some that was like, let me think about this a bit more. But yeah, I know it's a bit hypocritical of me saying that I kind of had to look up like for the first two puzzles. Actually, in my defense, the first puzzle I thought was a side mission. I was like, wow, Bloober Team's adding like side mission puzzles and stuff. That's pretty cool. But it was that as like part of the story, because like when I was reading this like first website that popped up, it was like, this is important for the story. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. But yeah, I would just say for people who just want to get into the game or are having troubles, please read every single note in detail you see. Look at the walls, look at your surrounding, your environment, everything, please. And I think the answer will just be like staring at you right in the face. A thing that I really enjoyed about this game also was just making the puzzles very rewarding. I actually found the puzzles to be fun at times, and I felt like I was actually doing something that was just progressing the story. I didn't feel like I was just doing puzzles for the sake of it and because the game is forcing me to, but instead I felt like I'm doing the puzzles to really move on and to really progress through the game, because almost like in some instances when you finish a puzzle, or you get a clue or something triggers, something activates, and there might be like enemies lurking there, or you might just have to figure out your way to maneuver to the other side. Like, it feels very interactive. And also, like, this game really highlights the element of fear. Like, there are so many areas in here where the sound mixing is top notch, and some things are like whispering in my ear. I know a lot of people on Twitter were talking about there's some rooms where there's like some people whispering at your ear and it feels creepy and unsettling, and I'm glad they kind of kept that element in. I think of the original Silent Hill, it was like that too. I also think that how they mix the music in here is actually pretty cool. Again, Akira is a very talented composer himself. The composer, as I said, for the original Silent Hill 2, and how he just merges and just kind of remakes this composition that he already did like 20 years ago, and gives it that new feeling, that new texture to kind of meld in to the remake, it just makes sense. It doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like he's doing too much cinematically speaking. It doesn't feel stale at all. It just feels like he's like returning to something he did 20 years ago and even perfecting it a bit more. I will say though, there's some areas, especially towards the end of the game, where in the original game the music was a lot louder and it was making a statement. It was like it really wants you to feel this feeling of pain and despair, that you're kind of like drowning in this sea of sadness or sorrow or whatever. But aside of those like metaphorical like adjectives and stuff, I think that really impacted a lot in terms of the scene. And in some scenes in this game, I feel that there's so much sound effects, so much dialogue that is louder than the music, that kind of loses like the oomph that the original scenes had. I'm not saying that all of them are like that. It's just some scenes in particular that I don't want to necessarily spoil, because it would kind of like ruin the whole point of this review. I'm trying to go spoiler free here. Well, I want to talk more about the acting and performances in this game. And wow, the acting in this game is superb. It genuinely plays a great homage to the original game. It's kind of embodying that awkwardness and that just kind of like introvertness that some characters have. And I think what takes the cake in some of these scenes is really just the performance, like in terms of the physicality, in terms of the expressions that the actors are conveying. Like, my god, there's a lot of just like facial features and facial motions that are going around when it comes to these actors, and they do a really good job. I think the actor for James, which, fun fact, I think he's supposed to be Thomas Wayne in the Batman Robert Pattinson movie, but he does a tremendous job in portraying James. It's a sort of awkward guy who's trying to find his wife, and he's exploring and having conversations with these characters that he knows is a bit iffy. He knows that he feels like an outsider. And those characters reacting to him in such strange ways, and him being weirded out and trying to like think it clearly and stuff. Like, you can see those slight expressions in his face and how he reacts. And I think it is a detail that is just so damn good, and it proves that Bloober Team hired the right cast to portray these characters. I really want to talk about the atmospheres and the areas in this game. Like, my god. Like, this game is beyond recognizable at times, and it took me a while to understand where I am in the game. I was trying to go off like memory to see like how far I am in the game, and there were some moments where I just completely forgot about how the original looked, and it was like just something incredible to see. Like, the town is much bigger. There's more interactable areas to go into to find more clues, find more lore drops, more side stuff, ammo, whatever. And it feels very alive within itself. There's a lot of people that are complaining before the game came out about there's not enough fog or whatever, but honestly, that wasn't really an issue. I think the fog levels and stuff is fine. I didn't find it something glaring or something like it ruined the original spirit. If anything, they just made it kind of better in this one. It still portrays the same emotion that I had in the original game of uncertainty. And things around that nature. And I think in some instances, this game is a bit scarier than the original game. I think the original game was more disturbing than it was scary. Obviously, with the themes that it has, very serious themes that it has, that even like Bloober Team in this game kind of like put a flash warning sign, just telling you all the content that the game has for those who are easily, I guess, disturbed by the content. But I feel that this game, it really has a huge emphasis on horror. Everything is built around like not only trying to scare the player but to scare James, and you can hear how James just pants and he's like trying to like breathe properly when he gets injured, or when he's running in a very like long distance, whenever he encounters too many enemies, or when he's fighting enemies and he's very like mad and afraid and he's screaming and groaning and a bunch of other things. There's a lot of details put into, I guess, immersing you in this atmosphere, like in this area where you feel that nothing is safe and that nothing makes sense. The only criticism that I could have in terms of the atmosphere, or I guess how the gameplay is, I would say, is that maybe in the beginning or in some instances of this game, I think they removed some parts of what made the original scene so impactful, or gameplay so impactful. Like, if you do a comparison like side by side of the original and the new remake, you kind of get the feeling that it doesn't have the same vibe attached to it. It feels a bit strange. Like, when you're walking in the remake, I didn't feel as threatened as I did in the original. Like, sure, the sound mixing was top notch. You kind of hear those weird noises lurking in the background. But in the original game, you kind of get that feeling of dread already with how the camera is positioned. Like someone is watching you, and you feel like nothing is necessarily like certain. Like you don't feel like you're completely safe in that environment. It was making a statement that was very strong already right from the get-go. Well, in the remake, it kind of takes a bit of a while and kind of relies on its audio elements to portray that power, to portray that message. Another, like, I guess, criticism that I want to make of this remake is how strangely optimized it is. It seems that everybody is being affected by the frame stutter thing that's going, like the meme that's going on with the frame stuttering and stuff. That it's kind of crazy. I know this game has only been around for, I think, a week or so. So I understand that not everything is going to be perfect. But there's some parts in this game where it was like, God, that looks hard to look at, or just play, or feel in general. So I was playing this thing on Steam. I have a 3070 NVIDIA graphics card, a GTX, I think. And that typically works well enough to run games, at the very least in 60 FPS, and still look pretty damn sharp. I'm not gonna list all the specs. I don't know it right at the get-go, but I know it's strong enough to run games. And I had to go to Reddit to like at least look at some settings that might help me increase some frame rates. Like there was a point where I had to even run this game on low so I could get a bit more frames. And I'm not gonna lie, even running this game on low still looks very damn impressive. You can still see the amount of detail put into the character design, the atmospheres. I don't think there is that much loss or that drastic quality, whether you use ray tracing or not, or whether you use the highest graphic settings or not. Like, I mean, you will see a difference, but I don't think it's like gameplay ruining if you just go at low settings. At least in my case, it wasn't. But anyway, returning to this thing, I still feel that this game is very strangely optimized, and Bloober Team really needs to put most of its effort properly optimizing this game, like with updates and stuff like that, because even, again, on the beefiest computers, or even a PS5, which this game was also released on a PS5, and there were apparently many people who were kind of disappointed by the frame rates, and they were forced to run it on performance mode, and even in performance mode, it was still stuttering. So yeah, Bloober Team kind of has a bit to fix when it comes to that type of stuff. I think narratively, this game is basically what you would expect. It's a one-on-one when it comes to just retelling the events of the original game. There isn't that much of a drastic narrative difference. There is a bit of a difference in terms of the boss fights, I will say. Like, the boss fights in this game are top-notch. There's much more level put into it, much more effort, and it feels very immersive. It doesn't feel like just a random boss that you find and you just kind of like shooting at it randomly until it dies. If anything, a lot of these bosses have different faces, and in these faces you either learn more about the lore of the character that you're fighting against, or you're just being more immersed into the atmosphere, and it gives you like into these very creepy and trippy areas where you really had to pull yourself together. I also really enjoyed the runbacks in this game. In the original Silent Hill 2, running back from floor to floor to floor of building, it was a pain in the ass. It was a mess, especially since the puzzles were much harder to solve. And it wasn't like just a super simple, it wasn't as simple as, I guess, in the remake. I mean, in the remake, it's pretty direct in terms of what items you have to find, what you need to combine. It basically just tells you right in front of your face. Whereas in the original, you really, really had to scavenge and look for the items and think well as to which parts you want to combine to solve the puzzle. But the runbacks, as I said, were just much worse than the original. It was much slower, much more grindier, and you really had to think back if you really wanted to do the runback. Whereas in this game, running back just kind of doesn't feel like that bad. It feels much more flexible and much more enjoyable. Whereas I didn't really have that much frustration going back and forth in the game. I really think this game is just incredible. This remake in this version is incredible, and I think it is superior in so many ways than its original version. I might even prefer this game over the original. Maybe the atmosphere in the original is a bit better because it's how unique and uncanny it is, especially with how outdated the graphics are. But I think in this remake, there's a lot of quality of life improvements that I would rather play this game again than play the original game. Again, the OST is phenomenal as always since Akira returned. The gameplay feels amazing, dynamic, and doesn't feel, I never felt bored playing this game at all. I always felt threatened, and I always felt like I needed to make my decisions wisely. I know I needed to just assess the situation as quick as possible and make sure that I'm making the right decisions. And man, the gunplay and everything felt incredible, and puzzles felt rewarding, much more rewarding than in the original, and it felt much more motivated to progress within the game and just to see how crazy and twisted it can get. So yeah, Bloober Team, you guys really nailed this one, and please remake Silent Hill 3. As for his score, I'm probably gonna get this like a strong 8 out of 10, leaning a bit more to potentially a 9 out of 10. It is a superb remake that I think it is around the leagues of a Resident Evil 2 or Resident Evil 4 remake. It is really that good and interesting, and I cannot wait to see what else Bloober Team has in store. Bloober Team, you restored the faith in the Silent Hill community for sure. But yeah, if you enjoy this review, if you enjoy this video, please leave a like, subscribe to the notification bell so you don't miss an upload from me. Let me know in the comments if you enjoy the game or not. I really want to hear just what the fans and what everybody has to say in general. But yeah, see you guys next time, and peace out, everybody.